Hello and welcome back to the big stage, brought to you by Betting Expert. My name's Joe Ryan. I'll be your host, and by the end of today's show, we'll give you our top 10 bets for the Premier League Game Week 8. So the international break is over. We're back to club football, and to help me discuss the games, I've got Rory Jennings on the line. Rory, how are you getting on?
Yeah, really good. Delighted the international break's over and we can get the focus back on the cut and thrust of the Premier League.
Absolutely. And I'm also once again joined by Ben Dinnery from Premier Injuries. So he is the go-to guy when it comes to player injuries, how long people are out for, when people are back in action. So Ben, once again, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for the invite back. Great to be here.
Great stuff. Now, something that we've been talking about, maybe actually in the show before, when Ben was on before the season started, was the sack race. So big news, of course, coming from Watford. They won the sack race. I tipped up Steve Bruce to be the first manager sacked. We'll get to that. Claudio Ranieri's back in the Premier League. So Rory, first of all, what do you make of that appointment? Do you expect some more heroics like he did in his time at Leicester?
No, I don't. I feel like this has got a disaster written all over it, and it wouldn't surprise me if we're discussing the sack race in a few months' time with Claudio Ranieri front and centre of it. I don't think this works out. I don't think that he is the right man for everything Watford need, and the way that they conduct themselves, Watford, I think it's wild, isn't it? Like, bearing in mind, I'm a Chelsea fan. And I think their approach to managers and the ruthless edge that they demonstrate with regard to their managerial position is crazy. So no, I think that this has got a disaster written all over it.
I mean, 7 points after 7 games, maybe that's almost what you'd expect for Watford. I mean, so Ben, do you think Watford actually jumped the gun with that sacking and trying to bring in Ranieri, or was it something maybe they had lined up already?
I mean, they have previous, and I know Claudio Ranieri is friendly with the Pozzo family. I think he's their 13th appointment since that family's took charge of the club. So does it come as any great surprise? Of course it doesn't. Do I think they've jumped the gun? I think that Watford have done okay. They've had some tough fixtures. But they identified a trend which they weren't too happy about, and they wanted to stop that slide. So they've moved early. They've went through the break. It gives Ranieri an opportunity of working with the squad on the training pitches before his first game in charge. And it's going to bring a feel-good factor to Vicarage Road. Everybody loves Ranieri. He's like your little granddad. Yeah, like you make the cuddling. He's good, and we've heard from the press conference already. He's already spoke about how he'll take the team out for a meal if they can keep a clean sheet against Liverpool. So I think a little bounce from Watford. And look, I know everybody's expecting Liverpool, but I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little bit nostalgic and swaying, and I'm a little bit more optimistic than Rory on this one.
Well, of course, that does lead us nicely into that first game of the weekend, Watford hosting Liverpool. Now, the bookies have this one as a pretty one-sided affair. Should be a comfortable Liverpool win on paper. But Rory, I mean, just talk us through how you see this one going. Is it going to be as easy as we maybe predict and the bookies are predicting as well?
Well, I certainly agree. And partly the motivation for me saying that I think Liverpool are going to win this convincingly is because of the current conditions at Watford. I don't think Ranieri is going to be suited to the fight that they are about to embark upon. But equally, I am slightly surprised, but also dazzled by Liverpool this season. I think they've been as good as they have ever been under Klopp. And I know that kind of comment gets a little bit of a reaction. It's generally seen as being a little bit too generous. But I truly do. Like, every game I've watched Liverpool this season, I think I've pretty much seen every game they've played. The relentlessness with which they play, they're pressing as well as they ever have done. They're looking as mean and as hungry for the title as they ever have. And I have had to almost redefine Liverpool, because prior to the season, I'm sure you and I had this conversation, Joe, but I was saying that I felt like Liverpool could win the league, but they were the least likely of the four that, in my opinion, could win it. I have totally re-evaluated that. I now think that Liverpool are as likely as anyone else to win the league, and I just don't think Watford have the minerals to stop them, with or without Claudio Ranieri.
Now, there is actually a little shred of hope for Watford. Ranieri is actually the top performing manager in home games against Liverpool in the Premier League. He's won 4 of his 5 meetings against the Reds. Ben, you're predicting a bit of a closer encounter. Rory and I going for a comfortable Liverpool win. But how do you see the match going?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tight. And there's a number of sort of telling factors. If you want to purely look at the data, you look at a team at Liverpool, highest XG, biggest, most big chances created. You've got Mo Salah, joint top scorer in the Premier League. And everything points to a comfortable Liverpool win. But, when I'm considering these fixtures, I'm looking at maybe some of those off the field influences, some of the other factors. Yes, it's going to be bouncing down at Vicarage Road, but also we see the impact of this international break, and in particularly 2 key players for me for Liverpool who will be involved with Brazil in the early hours of Friday morning. Now, they won't finish that game until around about 3 a.m. And then with that early kickoff at Vicarage Road, we're talking about less than a 33-hour turnaround. And of course, I'm talking about Alisson Becker, the goalkeeper, who was huge, and also Fabinho in midfield. Now, you take Fabinho out of that midfield, and we're talking about, well, who comes in there? We've got Jordan Henderson, who will likely to go central. Does James Milner come in on the right-hand side? I just think it weakens the spine of that Liverpool team. We also have injury concerns over Diogo Jota, but it looks as if he could train ahead of the match, although I would maybe expect Roberto Firmino to start. And is he going to be fully match fit and sharp? We just don't know, because he's been carrying that hamstring problem, and he's only had 2 games from the bench since his recovery.
So yeah, great point actually, Ben, with the fact there is that international travel. So we are looking at a comfortable win for myself and Rory, the betting expert community as well, going for Liverpool -1.5, but perhaps be wary of those travel implications on this one. So now we're going to move on to our first feature game of the round, and that is Aston Villa against Wolves. So a local derby sees us tee off on 3 o'clock on Saturday with Aston Villa hosting Wolves. Now Villa both teams have actually been kind of up and down this season. Of course, Villa getting some really big wins against Everton, Newcastle as well, and United away. Wolves have been up and down as well. Jimenez finally coming back to form after missing a lot of chances as well. But Rory, take us through your assessment of both sides so far and how you see this match playing out, given that it is a bit of a local derby as well.
I think Villa are likely to be too strong for Wolves. I think the issue that Wolves had, particularly earlier in the season, was just scoring goals. I think they looked so impotent going forward, and they just didn't look like they had any threat. I mean, that has been equalised a touch by Raul Jimenez's recent goal-scoring form. But generally speaking, I just don't know if there's enough aggression, just enough venom in that Wolves side. And if you compare that to Villa, I know Villa have been a little bit shaky and have had some decent results, and then they've juxtaposed those with some fairly shockingly poor ones, to be totally frank. I just think that overall Villa will be too strong. And in a derby, when it's as intense as this, I anticipate Villa being massively up for it. I think the fact that Dean Smith is local will help. And overall, I just think Villa are going to be that bit too strong.
And how about for you, Ben? I mean, just talk us through maybe some of the key injury updates for this match. So, Buendia is back, I think, for Villa. Should be in the starting lineup. He came back from on the bench last week. But yeah, talk us through some of the key players and injuries for this one.
Yeah, for me, Villa it's been a difficult transitional phase. Obviously, losing Jack Grealish at the beginning of the season, and Dean Smith probably looked at that in a move away from that more familiar 4-2-3-1 formation, which he was fairly stuck with, getting rid of Grealish and bringing in the likes of Leon Bailey, Bertrand Traore. It opened up a lot of possibilities, and we've seen that in recent weeks with a sort of 5-3-2 defensively, or a 3-5-2 on the attack, with Matt Targett on one side and Matty Cash on the other, sort of bombing forward. And I really like Villa in this sort of newfound formation, as it were. The Chelsea result aside, it doesn't look great on paper. I think that was 3-0, but Villa were actually okay. And then we've seen them come back with a good result against Everton. And then they went to Old Trafford and picked up another 3 points. Disappointing against Tottenham. But look, I think I'm with Rory on this one. I think Villa could be just a little bit too strong. Wolves, flattered to deceive. I was really hopeful after a hugely disappointing season under Nuno last year. I used to love watching Wolves, and then Nuno ruined everything for me, this passive, conservative style of approach. Bruno coming in, we spoke about this manager who wants to attack, go out, and I was disappointed, if the truth be known, of how they started. It was always going to be difficult for Raul Jimenez coming back into the team following such a serious injury. And they seem to be a team of creators underperforming their XG, and with nobody to put it, in the back of the net. Hee-chan, to an extent, is maybe, remedied that. But I'm not one to jump on the bandwagon too quickly, although he did get 2 goals against Newcastle. He has underperformed his XG in every season that he's performed. And statistically, we just don't have the numbers from his time at RB Leipzig because he wasn't involved a great deal. Will we see Adama Traore this weekend? We just don't know. He's been on the fringes of that first team for the last couple of weeks. But Trincao was tested positive for COVID during the international break, which was released him from the international squad. So that could be his way back into the team. It depends on which Adama Traore comes to the party. When he's good, he's really good. And when he's bad, well, he's
horrid.
He's not very good.
Well, that's why Villa wanted to get rid of him as well. Now, our top prediction from the betting expert community in this one is under 2.5 goals. So, Rory, just looking at the kind of the tactical shape that Ben's kind of hinted at there, do you see it as being maybe a bit of an attacking game, but ultimately the finishing of both sides might let them down?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good assessment. I think Ben touched on it in his summary of Aston Villa there, and I think he's bang on. Aston Villa this season have played Chelsea twice. I think I would go so far, bearing in mind all the teams that Chelsea have played so far this season. Chelsea have already played Tottenham, we've already played Arsenal, we've already played Man City, we've already played Liverpool, played in Europe. Genuinely, it sounds ridiculous, but I've watched every single one of those games. The hardest game that we have played is against Aston Villa. Aston Villa have been the best opposition to face Chelsea so far this season, with the exception of Man City. I think that they really look good. And I know that we've beaten them twice. We knocked them out of the cup, which wasn't quite a victory, but we knocked them out of the cup. And we bashed them in the league. But they were better than us that day, which I took a lot of heart in, because I think if Chelsea are going to win the league, you need to win games where you don't deserve to. But the example I would use of Chelsea being outplayed, outthought on the touchline, aside from Man City, would be Aston Villa. They've also scored double the amount of goals that Wolves have managed to score, which I think is a really worrying sign. So certainly for Bruno Lage. So overall, I just think Villa are going to be too strong here. And yes, the profligate nature of both forward lines for me suggests that I've gone for 2-0 Villa, and I'm fairly happy with that prediction.
Yeah, I'm going to go along those lines as well. I'm going for a home win here. Again, home advantage for me should be key. I know, Ben, you're expecting a bit of a tighter affair, but that covers it for the first feature game. Now we're going to move on to our quick-fire predictions for the rest of the 3 o'clock kickoffs on Saturday. So starting off, we go over to the King Power, Leicester against Man United. Now, Ben, talk us through some of the big injury concerns. Obviously, Raphael Varane is out for Man United. How important do you think that absence will be?
I mean, huge, especially when you consider that Harry Maguire is likely to miss out as well. Neither player involved in training. We know that Raphael Varane is going to be missing with a groin problem for a few weeks. Harry Maguire is still not training with the team. So that would suggest that unless there's some kind of miracle in the build-up to the match, that he's going to be missing out as well. So that means Victor Lindelof will be probably the central pairing for a first start of the season for Eric Bailly. And it's going to be a bit of a baptism of fire for him if he's coming up against a Jamie Vardy, 6 goals already and looking sharp as attack.
Now, yeah, I'll lead into our prediction actually from the betting expert community. We're going over 3.5 goals at the King Power. Now, Rory, I mean, which way do you see this one going? You're predicting a bit of a tighter affair, right?
I think it will be fairly tight, yes. Firstly, I feel like I'm in a massive. I feel like I'm massively in the minority. There's not many people that approach Leicester and Brendan Rodgers with the same philosophy that I do. I think that it's all a little smoke and mirrors. I don't think Brendan Rodgers is quite the oracle that he's portrayed as, and I think that there is a ceiling with what he can achieve, particularly with Leicester. So I'm not necessarily a convert to Brendan Rodgers, and I generally find it fairly odd when he is touted around some of the biggest jobs in football. Like, the Arsenal job becomes available, or Tottenham, or any club with significant aspirations. Newcastle. I mean, yeah, I just don't quite understand it. A club like Newcastle, who are now in a situation where they can discuss any manager in the world. Whether they can actually attract them is neither here nor there. They can discuss any manager in the world. I just find it ludicrous, Brendan Rodgers, even in that conversation. I really do. But I also concede most people disagree with me on this one, and it's one I will have to just swallow for a bit until the cheeky non-converts join my side of thinking. And I think that's gradually happening. Leicester failing to qualify for the 2 previous seasons' Champions Leagues, for example, made some people see what I was saying. Saying that, I think Manchester United, I just don't know what's going on with that club. On paper, they are sublime. They're pretty much world class in every position, but they can't get it right. I feel like Solskjaer just doesn't have what it takes. And the fact that, Ben pointed it out there, the fact that we've got not necessarily their 2 best players, but I would say their 2 most important players. I would say that Harry Maguire, if you would say one player that is most important for Manchester United, I genuinely believe it's Harry Maguire. I don't think anybody else can do what he does at that club. The way that he marshals the back line, the way that he commands them to drive forward, the way that he makes sure that they start their attack at least 15 yards up the pitch, I think it's almost invaluable. And I know people will say Cristiano Ronaldo, but I think you can bring in Cavani there. And virtually every other position, I feel like there is an adequate replacement, whereas we're looking at Lindelof, aren't we? I think Lindelof was off recently because he had a baby. Huge congratulations to him for that, by the way. But the drop-off from Varane and Maguire to, what do we reckon, Ben Lindelof and Bailly?
Yeah, that were the 2 lately starters.
I mean, that's it. You're comparing chalk and cheese there, aren't you? And the way that Leicester have been playing, I know they haven't been good, but they are looking quite dangerous going forward. I feel like they can do Manchester United. They can certainly cause Manchester United some problems. So I'm going for a draw.
I mean, yeah, you look at how Vardy and Iheanacho as well capitalised on some mistakes at Crystal Palace last week. I feel like, they should be able to do the same against United. But Ben, Leicester defensively, talk us through maybe why they are struggling so much. I mean, Schmeichel's doing the best he can, making a lot of saves, but they're still conceding a lot of goals.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, George, but since the start of the year, really, so this is nothing new. In almost the Community Shield and FA Cup final victories, papered over a lot of cracks because defensively their data has been very, very poor. Amongst some of the lowest within the Premier League. So is it a surprise that they haven't started the season very well? No, it isn't. Reasons as to why, I think you can point at Johnny Evans. The veteran centre-back is pivotal in that back line for, again, just marshalling his players. And Rory talked about the importance of Harry Maguire. I think Johnny Evans is equally as important into that Leicester back line. And once he was out, you expected maybe Wesley Fofana to then come in and step up to the plate. He suffered a serious injury, which will rule him out for the remainder of the year. Soyuncu hasn't looked anything like the player that we've seen last season. And then Vestergaard's come in. He wasn't fit. He's an acquired taste, Vestergaard. And I think there's a lot of... I'm being very, very generous here.
Yeah, that's a very polite appraisal that.
But for me, a lot of this falls onto the toes of Brendan Rodgers. I still don't think he knows what his best formation is and his strongest team at the moment. We've seen him go with a 4-2-3-1, a 3-1-4-2. Last time out was a 4-4-2, a little bit better. I think Vardy does now play. I like him with an improved, with somebody standing alongside him in Kelechi. I do like that. But what's happened to James Maddison this season? He's disappeared. Whether that's a hangover from his previous injury or what, just confidence issue. But we were once talking about the likes of a Jack Grealish and a James Maddison going head to head in this England squad, and now you look at the trajectories of the careers and they're just incomparable. I think James Maddison, if he hopes to recapture any kind of the form, that force him into that England squad, and he needs to do it sooner rather than later. And I'm just not seeing it at the moment.
No, but I mean, going back to the game on Saturday as well, with the defensive frailties, I think over 3.5 goals does look like a really solid bet and a really good value bet at that. There should be plenty of goals at the King Power. Now, another game that's going to hopefully deliver a lot of goals, or at least does traditionally for one team, is Manchester City against Burnley. The last 4 home games have ended Man City 5, Burnley 0. Rory, you're going for exactly the same kind of prediction for this game. I mean, yeah, just talk us through quickly maybe on this one, why you see City are going to dominate against Burnley so much.
Because history has taught us that that's going to happen. Only a fool doesn't learn from history. And I'm not going to argue with that. It's written in the stars, isn't it? There's not much more I can say, Joe. History has taught us. Anyone that says that this game isn't going to finish 5-0 is wildly wrong, because we learn from history. It's important that we acknowledge the lessons that the past has taught us.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going for 4-0, so I'm going for a little bit less. But, I mean, it should be pretty much a walkover. Ben, talk us through the Burnley squad. It's got the highest average age in the league. I mean, where do they go from here? I mean, do they pose any kind of threat to City? This is just going to be a walkover, right?
Yeah, I mean, not really. Will we see Sean Dyche change his formation, his setup? Of course we won't. He'll go 4-4-2. He'll stick with that fairly rigidly. There are a few doubts in that Burnley squad. Charlie Taylor has picked up a knock, which is a worry, and also Ben Mee has tested positive for COVID-19, so he has been ruled out of the game. For me, the one hope, the one silver lining potentially in that Burnley squad might be the arrival of Maxwell Cornet. Looks to be a great asset. He can break through those lines. The only worry at this point is he's had issues with regards to his hamstring. And so whether he starts or not, that remains to be seen. But I'm one of those that, forget the history. Look, I think this might be a little bit of a tighter affair. In the past, look, we'd look to Sergio Aguero. He's your main guy, or Gabriel Jesus through the centre. They're getting you goals. I look at this City team now, and I'm just thinking, well, who's Pep going to start there, first and foremost? Is it Phil Foden? Could it be Raheem Sterling? Ferran Torres was in with a shout, but he suffered what looks to be maybe a metatarsal injury with Spain. We've got Jesus, who's away on Brazil duty, so maybe Mahrez has come in. Is he as sharp as he could be? Maybe not. Edison also doubts. So the problem is it's Pep changing his lineup. He might have one eye on Europe, so he may be involving some of those fringe players who may take, a 20, 30, or even the first half just to get up to the speed of the game.
Now, for me, I think it's actually a really good opportunity for Kevin De Bruyne to come in and show his stuff, show why he is one of the best players in the league. Our community top tip for this one is Man City -2.25. So, of course, if they win by 3 goals, that'll be a comfortable winning bet. Now we're going to move on to the next game on the list. So Norwich against Brighton. Norwich, of course, got their first point last time out in a goalless draw against Burnley. So Rory, you were right. That would have been last on match of the day. Nothing really to write home about with that. But Rory, just take us through Norwich and kind of where you see them being right now and how you see this game shaping up against Brighton.
Oh, Joe, I find Norwich such a difficult conversation because it just feels so flat, such an uninspiring club. I don't actually know what the ambition of the club is. Like, genuinely, I think most people naturally assume that if you are a promoted club, you do everything that you can, everything in your power to cement your place in the Premier League and use that status once you've secured it for a couple of years to try and then kick on again. You become an established Premier League club, then you become a top 10 club, then you try and become a Europa League club with the ambition of then trying to win the league. I think that's what people assume the methodology is. I don't think it is that with Norwich. I don't think that they particularly want to stay in the Premier League. I genuinely don't. I don't think that is the template that they are operating in. I think they quite enjoy the profits that come with the Premier League. I think they quite enjoy the parachute payments that are dropping out. They came back up to the Premier League without the best player in Buendia. They came up with the same front line that proved they weren't good enough last time they were in the league. The same manager that proved they weren't good enough last time they were in the league. And it's just so flat. I mean, I've actually got them down getting a point against Brighton because I think Brighton is a little bit smoke and mirrors as well. But ultimately, I feel like Norwich will get a point. Brighton aren't quite as good as everyone seems to think. They haven't really played anybody. I feel like Norwich have to get a point at some point. So law of averages suggests it's going to happen. So why not against Brighton? But I don't know. But Ben, do you think I'm onto something here? Do you think Norwich? This is a ridiculous. It's a ridiculous sounding question, but just go with me on this. Ben, do Norwich want to be Premier League club consistently?
It's hard to make a strong argument for the case. If you listen to the board, if you listen to Delia Smith, they talk about their budget restraints and how they're unable to go out and splash big money in the transfer market. Well, you look at other clubs in maybe a similar position. So if you can't spend the money, you adapt, you implement different philosophies. I'm not sure what kind of budget Brentford had, but they're looking at targeting players through their Moneyball and implement more of a methodical and data driven insights to try and unearth those golden nuggets. So it's a definition of insanity, isn't it? You keep on doing the same things over and over again and you're expecting a different outcome, or do they not? As you alluded to, are they just quite happily being almost that yo-yo club and going up and go, too good for the championship but nowhere near good enough to maintain their status in the top flight?
Well, yeah, I mean, Norwich are the odds-on favourites for relegation, so I mean, if you're looking for a pretty safe bet, then that should be the way to go. But also looking at this game, Ben, I want to get your thoughts on Brighton's defensive strengths. So the tip actually for this game is for Brighton to win. I mean, we've kind of touched on it there with Norwich's failings in front of goal. But yeah, Ben, just touch on their defensive qualities, why Brighton are going to be quite strong at Carrow Road.
Look, I think the revelation this season has certainly been the return of Shane Duffy alongside Lewis Dunk. They've been the cornerstone of that Brighton backline. And even in the absence of players like Dan Burn, Tariq Lamptey, former Chelsea player who had a great start to his career at Brighton, they haven't really been affected. Joel Ventman's come in. We've also seen Cucurella, the Spanish fullback, who not only offers some great sort of defensive numbers, but offensively we've seen him charging down that left wing, and he could be a threat at both ends of the pitch. So I really like that. I mean, look, I agree with you here, Rory. I'm not convinced by Brighton in any way, shape or form. I don't think they're doing anything hugely different from last year, other than the fact that they're hitting their data points. They've always been a team that's underperformed historically. Now they're converting the chances, and now they're in line with their data. And yeah, look, they're okay. They're a solid team. But am I getting caught when do I think they're going to threaten one of the the status quo and challenge for a European spot? No, I think they'll be happy in and around that mid-table sort of 10th to 12th.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to a game where we actually all agree on the outcome. We're going to look at Southampton against Leeds. Now here the bookmakers are having Southampton as the slight favourite, but also looking for a low-scoring affair. So low-scoring one in this one, but the community tip is for Leeds -1/4, so it's really a close one on this with this regard. But Rory, just take us through what you've made of Southampton and Leeds so far and how you see this game playing out.
I've been really surprised by Leeds. I thought that they were going to firstly kick on from last season, but also benefit from having stadiums full again. I thought that they were going to get the bounce of your first year in the Premier League. I thought they were going to get the benefits of that in their second year because they'd be playing in front of a packed Taylor Road for the first time in the Premier League for the first time since 2004. So I really thought that they were going to do well. The fact that they have been struggling and playing quite poorly, getting some fairly poor results, is a worry. And it's now getting to the stage where I feel like this fixture is actually going to be quite symbolic, because whoever loses this fixture, I think they're going to be in a relegation scrap. I didn't anticipate either, really. I thought that Southampton could, because when they lost Danny Ings, there was a time when they seemed to be hemorrhaging their best players. I mean, it looked like Ward-Prowse was a Rizzler paper from going to Villa as well, didn't it? It didn't happen. But I thought that Southampton could be in trouble, but I never anticipated Leeds ending up embroiled in a relegation fight. But whoever doesn't take maximum points here, and I don't think either will, by the way, I think both need to really start worrying about that 40-point mark, which is, I just can't believe that we're saying that. It's as surprising as anything else in the league. Earlier I touched on the fact that I got Liverpool wrong. I didn't anticipate Liverpool being as good as this. Nothing has surprised me more than Leeds this season. No way did I think they'd be down the bottom without a win after 7 games.
And how about for you, Ben? I mean, you've been quite dismissive as well of Leeds, right? You're feeling what's going wrong really for them right now?
I think teams are working out and understanding how to play against this Leeds team. You know, Marcelo Bielsa doesn't hide anything. You know what's going to come. The high energy, high press, this basketball will run you into the ground. And teams are finding a way of finding those little pockets of space and exploiting that. And maybe that's to the detriment of Marcelo Bielsa. You know, everybody eulogizes about the Argentine coach, and rightly so. But am I just seeing a bit of a one-trick pony here? And I'm probably speaking out of turn. But look, I watched him against Newcastle, for example, and how bad we've been this season. We could have walked away with 3 points there. You know, Leeds need to adapt and change their style of play. You cannot be gung-ho, you know, for 90 minutes in every game if you hope to achieve or ultimately win anything. That leaves them too open at the back and susceptible to concede goals on the break.
I mean, what I also want to point out, Patrick Bamford's only got 1 goal so far this season. So what's going wrong for him? Is he just not getting the service, or is he just lack of confidence? What do you think it is?
Yeah, he's getting the chances, just not taking them. You know, he has picked up a couple of knocks. It looks as if he may miss out this weekend. So that would be a big blow for Leeds, because he don't really have somebody who can come in and fill those boots. So Rodrigo, it would be the likely starter in his absence. Another big player, I mean, we've seen him step up, it would be Rafinha. But again, he's involved in that Brazilian squad. And we don't know whether he's going to be involved in the match. Bielsa talked about it depend on his minutes on the game, how he recovers, how long he plays, you know, etc. Look, this is a difficult one. But on the flip side, we're looking at Southampton, and we're going to see a Southampton side without James Ward-Prowse for the first time since May 2019. So I just don't know how they're going to cope. I mean, he's played every minute of the Premier League for the last 2 seasons. So that's going to be a massive, massive blow for Ralph Hasenhüttl and the rest of the team.
So let's have your quick prediction for this one, Ben. How do you see it going?
It's very, very tight, but I am going with a draw.
Yeah, same here. And I think, Rory, you're going down the same path. We're all going for a 1-1 draw.
I'm going for a 1-1, yeah.
That's it. Finally agreeing on something on this one. But now something we're going to move on to the next game as well. We're going to look at your beloved Chelsea, Rory. So we have Brentford hosting Chelsea, of course, in the late kickoff on Saturday. So, Rory, take us through. I mean, the feelings of being top of the league, of course, must be pretty good. But looking back at the last game against Southampton, how did you feel Chelsea performed? And, you know, did it work with Timo Werner and Lukaku playing together, in your view?
We weren't particularly good against Southampton. I mean, the final 6 or 7 minutes of that game changed the entire feeling going into the international break. I mean, we went into the international break, top of the league, full of the joys of spring, because we happened to score 2 fairly late goals. And I think it could have been very different. I think that what's happened is with Chelsea, if we were having this conversation, or when we were having this conversation, in fact, 3 or 4 weeks ago, it looked like Chelsea were really solid, an established system. Romelu Lukaku playing as brilliantly as we hoped he would, and everything looked perfect. Since then, it's changed a touch. There is a vulnerability to this Chelsea team now that perhaps we didn't foresee. I think Lukaku's form has definitely shifted. He hasn't looked as dominating as he did earlier in the season. Our reliance on Mason Mount, our lack of ability to, when Mason Mount was out, was worrying. In fact, obviously we had 2 defeats in a week, if you include the Juventus defeat when we went over to the Deli Alpi, or whatever it is now called, and got beat over there. So there is an element of vulnerability to this Chelsea team, and I think we saw that none other than when we played against Man City. I think the way that they dominated at Stamford Bridge was a concern. So this game against Brentford is actually quite worrying, because I got Brentford wrong. I thought that they were going to be, you know, almost guaranteed relegation fodder. I certainly don't think they're in that conversation for relegation anymore. I think the match of the season so far was their game against Liverpool, where they went blow for blow, which is very impressive. And they're going to be up for this. I mean, weirdly, I've never met a Brentford fan in my life, but weirdly, they see us as a rival, so they're going to be really up for it. So there's a bit of jeopardy here. There's a little bit of concern. But if you're going to win the league and you're going to try and retain the Champions League, you have to win at Griffin Park, don't you? You just have to. So Chelsea must win this game. I think we will, but I'm not quite as confident as I was 3 or 4 weeks ago about this fixture.
Yeah, similar story from our betting expert community as well. The top prediction is for under 2.5 goals in this one. So perhaps a bit of a cagey affair. I know, yeah, obviously there was the 3-3 against Liverpool. But Ben, how have you assessed Brentford so far? What kind of injury worries do you think they would have, if not, or what can they exploit against Chelsea?
I have been very impressed. There had been a lot of talk about Brentford for several years before they've actually arrived in, on the big stage. And before a ball was kicked, I think we thought they were maybe this season's Sheffield United, very tight, defend really well, attack open. They're bringing a new, different style and philosophy to the game, and they've showed that, and they've come through those early game weeks with flying colours. I actually have Chelsea getting a narrow win here, and although Brentford so far this season, the data top 7 for defensive output and also offensively, so performed really, really well. But for me, I think that the biggest game, and Rory mentioned it, Liverpool. Yes, they were great, and they could have come away with 3 points, but Liverpool just had that little bit of nous in being able to exploit the spaces, create those opportunities, and got 3 goals with the likes of Salah. And I think Chelsea, with the quality that they have, with Mason Mount, with Lukaku, we expect him to be fit. Even Tino Werner coming into a little bit of form, then I think they'll come away with a victory. But I can't see Chelsea keeping a clean sheet in this one.
I'm going for a actual 3-0 win for Chelsea. I do think they will be comfortable enough to get a really good win here. So Rory, I know you're both you and Ben are kind of being a bit cagey, expecting Brentford to come up with something. But yeah, I'm going to go for a comfortable Chelsea win. But now we're going to move on to Sunday's games and the next feature match. So there's Everton against West Ham. So the Toffees host the Hammers on Sunday. Now, Ben, just take us through some of the injury updates or the injury news that is coming out of Everton and West Ham even. Is there any kind of big news to come from both sides?
Yeah, I mean, the Everton, just to kick things off, there's huge. We've got doubts all over the place. I think some of those headliners, Seamus Coleman, Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Lucas Digne. We've had a mixed update from Rafa Benitez. We've seen Lucas Digne released from the French squad last week. Didier Deschamps said there was a little bit discomfort. The good news is it's not as serious as a problem that kept him out for a month in the Euros. He's had treatment for the last 2 or 3 days, and he did train on Thursday. So barring any kind of reaction, he should be in and around that starting 11. On the opposite flank, Seamus Coleman, he could recover from his own hamstring problem. That's kept him out the last couple of games. And again, he's back on the training pitches. Benitez was a little bit more coy on Richarlison and DCL. He wouldn't give any kind of definitive answer when pushed on whether any of those 2 players were back. What we do know is prior to game week 7, so last time Everton played, those 2 players were working on an individual program. They were training away from the main group, so they're progressing quite well. So whether Benitez is just keeping these cards close to his chest, or there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors involved in there, or he just doesn't know, he wouldn't be pinned down on whether either would start, and that could be huge for Everton. Of course, we've seen Salomon Rondon come into that team, and he's still getting up to the pace of return to the Premier League. He hadn't played competitive football for a long while. And the other big talking point, which could have implications in that back line, again, is the availability of Yerry Mina. And he's due to play for Colombia on Thursday night. The good news for Evertonians is obviously they don't play until Sunday. So that gives a big Colombian centre-back an extra 24 hours to recover. And as long as he comes through that game, he could be pushing for a start.
I want to bring up Yerry Mina. Actually, he's probably one of the strongest defenders in the league, but he'll be coming up against Mikel Antonio. It's one of the highlights, I feel like, of the game week. It could be a really interesting battle on the pitch. But Rory, I mean, how do you see one of the best defenders in the league in terms of the stats coming up against Mikel Antonio?
I mean, I rate Antonio so highly. I'm aware of what Yerry Mina's been doing, but I do think that he has an error in him. And I feel like Mikel Antonio can force that error. It's interesting hearing Ben talk there about the injuries. And of course, they're going to be significant for Everton. But you've got to remember that they should have won at Old Trafford without Richarlison, without Coleman, they without Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So Rafael Benitez is almost a master at working out a system and playing the cards that he's been dealt. So even with those injuries, I still think it's going to be a really tough game for West Ham. I'm fully aware of how good West Ham are. I acknowledge the brilliance of David Moyes. I think they've probably been the surprise package, or certainly one of them, of the last couple of years. I mean, they have been brilliant. The fact that they're currently playing in Europe when last year I tipped them to go down tells you quite how good they've been. But I think this will be a really good game. And if we explore that duel, the Antonio versus Mina, I think it's fascinating. I love those old-fashioned centre forward against a no-nonsense centre half. I think they're brilliant competitive affairs, and I love them. But I'm backing Antonio to come out on top.
I mean, yeah, just to touch on as well the form of some of those Everton players that basically have stepped up. So things like Damari Gray, Andros Townsend. Ben, I mean, talk us through maybe why have they improved so much given those injuries? Also, Decore as well, you mentioned. What is it about those players that have really impressed you so far?
Yeah, I mean, Decore, I've loved him since Watford, to be honest. And even this season, by his own admission. And we talked about Rafa's tactical nous and understanding of the game. And he's obviously seen things in Decore on the training pitches and said, look, I'm going to give you a little bit more of a license to roam. There's a little bit more freedom on the pitch. Let's forget about, those defensive requirements. We've got Alan, who's going to be sitting in there. With potentially maybe a back five or a back four to cover you. So if you want to get forward, do so. And he's really, Everton have benefited from that. Got a couple of assists and at least a couple of goals under his belt already this term. And if you had spoke to me before the start of the season about Andros Townsend and Damari Gray, I would have dismissed anything you had, any positives you had to see on either of those two players. But they've been revelations. I think Townsend is almost, he had a point to prove. Maybe he's coming to, the twilight years of his career, and he's a lot more active within media circles, and people are talking about his time at Palace and should he be involved in, and doing so many public appearances, and maybe he was planning for that transition for post game. But look, he's come back and he's proven some of those critics wrong. And he's really going out there. I mean, it suits his style of play. Benitez will say, get the ball, get it in the box. We've got the likes of Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin there, who put it in. And Damari Gray, again, he's a player who I didn't really care for at Leicester, but I just think he's went away. Maybe he's matured a little bit. And also he's got a lot of doubters in his own mind. And maybe that's a driving factor in how he's performing so well. I don't think that he can continue to sustain the level of performances in his outputs that he is overperforming his data massively. But what a great start to the season. And like I say, that's testament to Rafa's recruitment, because he come into that, he come in at Everton, and it was important for him to get off on a good footing, because I think the crowd were baying for Benitez to fail, so they could, so.
Well, I'm hoping for Damari Gray to keep on overperforming. He's in my fantasy team, so hopefully he keeps doing well. But Ben, let's have your quickfire prediction for Everton West Ham.
Tough based on the team news, but as it currently stands, I'm sitting right on the fence, and I'm saying 1-1.
And Rory, yourself?
I think Moyes going back to his former club. I think he's got a point to prove, and I'm never doubting David Moyes again. I'm going for a tight 2-1 win to West Ham United.
Now I'm going the complete opposite way. I'm going for a home win. I feel like Everton, with those players like Townsend and Gray, they should get the win. And also the betting expert community is tipping Everton -1/4. We're now going to move on to our next feature game. Ben, we're going to talk about your beloved Newcastle in their game against Spurs. So, of course, the massive news from the international break. Newcastle's takeover. Mike Ashley is out. Ben, give us your thoughts on that whole scenario. How happy are you as a Newcastle fan?
I mean, it's almost like a huge weight has been lifted from our shoulders. For years, what seems like an absolute eternity, Newcastle seem to have settled for mediocrity. No ambitions, no optimism, scrape survival in the Premier League. Mike Ashley walks away with a big chunk of change in his pocket, and then we reset and we come back in August and start the whole rigmarole again. It's been painstaking at times, and it's just sucked the life out of supporters who've been with the club for decades and decades and decades, and almost to the point where there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, just to see Ashley gone and out of the club, you may have seen the news, the supporters celebrating. You will never quite understand of how the feeling of the supporters are at the moment on Tyneside. You will get a flavour of that on Sunday, because the atmosphere will be absolutely electric.
And how about for you, Rory? I mean, how do you see that news, and just for the Premier League in general, to have another potential like Man City, so big money coming into the league? Do you think it's a good thing for the league or potentially detrimental?
It's brilliant for the Premier League, the brand of the Premier League. I mean, there's no doubt that it makes the Premier League a more exciting, more newsworthy, more thrilling place. You are now going to have a situation where what you don't have is an established top four competing for the top four. And make no mistake, the establishment, Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, the thing that they fear most isn't each other. It's Newcastle United or whoever it is coming in and muscling in and bullying their way into that top four berth. And I think this works for Newcastle. I think in terms of what it means, I don't think anybody, even somebody who has Roker Park tattooed on their calf, wouldn't begrudge Newcastle getting rid of Mike Ashley and hopefully Steve Bruce. I think everybody's in favour of that.
I have to disagree with you there, Rory, because you know what? I couldn't care one jot what happens down the road at Sunderland. They
really?
could go at absolutely
you know what,
nothing.
Sometimes maybe I'm wrong, because I do appreciate that the antipathy between those two clubs is a very significant one. But what I would also say is, even in my most tribal, bias, loyal way to Chelsea, there are certain things that I don't enjoy seeing in other clubs. Like the way that certain clubs have been run isn't what I enjoy. And there were moments when Newcastle United being essentially attacked. But Ben, on the level, the plight of Sunderland.
Yeah.
What you want to see is Newcastle United beating Sunderland on a regular basis. You might want to see them go down, come back up, go down again, beat them again. What you don't really want to see is the boardroom doing that job for you, is it?
You know what? However it comes about, I couldn't care less. We may be in the same division and we may beat them twice in a season. If they're down there and they're getting beat off somebody else week in and week out, do you know what? Check out the local fans forums and you will see on the Sunderland ones pages upon pages upon pages of streams and threads on Newcastle, on Ashley, on the takeover. I mean, it runs deep, and there's no fence sitting here. It's red and white and black and white. You're not wishing each other well, and you're going, no, I don't wish them any success in any way, shape, or form ever.
Fair. I got that wrong then. But what I would say is everybody aside from a gentleman who has Roker Park tattooed on his calf was happy to see Mike Ashley leave Newcastle United, because it was unjust what was going on there. And when you think about the club, when you think about what the history of the club, the Gallagate, the Strawberry, whatever you want to say, it was a sad state of affairs. So I'm excited by this. I mean, there is a different conversation to be had as to whether it should have happened, but keeping it strictly in a footballing context, it's great for the Premier League, and I believe that the future is incredibly bright for Newcastle. I did a video where I said I think that they'll win the Premier League by 2025, and I totally stand by that.
There you go. Now, talking about who should be leaving Newcastle. So now Steve Bruce is the odds-on favourite, massive odds-on favourite to be the next manager to leave. But Ben, do you think he should stick around for a little bit to maybe get a chance to kind of prove himself, or you just want a new manager straight away?
Look, I think Steve Bruce, and I've got nothing against Steve Bruce whatsoever. And he's had his back against the wall since he entered the club. Since Rafa was worshipped on Tyneside. Again, that's another conversation that I've never fully understood. So Steve Bruce has been up against that, and given what he's had to work with in the conditions that has been handed to him, I think he's done a really good job. I think he's been a little bit unfortunate. Some of the things that have went off the field have just been outright disgusting. And the issue is Steve Bruce will not continue in this job. We'll be lucky if he's sitting in the dugout this weekend, and I wish him, really, really well. I know internally, as a man manager, as a person, they cannot speak more highly of Steve Bruce. They absolutely love him. He's a great guy, and look, yeah, he might have limitations in terms of maybe some tactical aspects of his game, but like I say, for me, he's come in and he's done a job. And even if Benitez had been delivering some of the results, not necessarily the performances that Bruce had, he would have been lauded. Because let's not forget, people look back on it with rose-tinted glasses. I remember on a Wednesday night against Manchester City, we had 28% possession at home, with the view that we wanted to conserve ourselves for the following game. And I think we played Huddersfield. And we actually we drew nils each with Huddersfield on the Saturday. So don't come back with all of this bull about how Benitez is the Messiah and is great. Because up here, he wasn't, not in my eyes. And Steve Bruce, on a fraction of his salary, by the way, has come in and done a solid job under the circumstances. And I wish him every success in the future, whatever that may be.
Fair enough. Now, let's talk about the match, obviously, on Sunday against Spurs. Our community is looking at over 3.5 goals as the best bet. But Ben, can you just give a quick injury update? So what concerns have Newcastle and Spurs got going into this one?
Again, we've had a lot on Tyneside. The main talking points would be guys of Callum Wilson, Jamal Lascelles, John Joe Selvey. Wilson and Lascelles have been pictured on the training pitches, so that looks good. Lascelles would be more of a place to start potentially. Callum Wilson, he's a massive player for us, but he's been dogged by hamstring injuries and this latest thigh problem. Whether he's risked from the start, again, that's a question. If it's Steve Bruce and it's one last hurrah, who's to say that he just doesn't go, I want to go out on a high, I'll throw him in there. If he breaks down, who cares? They'll go and buy somebody else, and it's another manager's problem. Joe Willock, again, another big summer signing, hasn't quite hit the dizzy heights of last year, but he was forced off last time out against Wolves. He's recovered, so we would expect him back in that team. And also maybe Martin Dubravka for the first time this season. We've seen Freddie Woodman and Carl Darlow in recent times, but Martin Dubravka, he's back fully training, so he could come into that team, which is good news. For Tottenham, I think the main talking point will be around Stephen Burgoyne. He had a couple of knocks on his ankle, which has ruled him out the last few games and the recent internationals. He shouldn't be too far away. But again, whether he just has that sharpness and that fitness in his legs to be risked from the start, we just don't know.
But Rory, of course, Spurs did get that win last time out against Villa. But just talk us through your perspective of Tottenham right now and how they're going to go into this one. Will they take the confidence into it, and do they stand a chance?
I really hope not. I really hope that Newcastle can stunt that, because that recent Tottenham result surprised me. I thought that they were in trouble, and I was so convinced that they were in trouble. I started actually looking up for a situation where a manager had been manager of the month in 1 month and sacked the following month. That's what I was hoping for. Sadly, that doesn't look like it was going to happen, because it was a very impressive result for Tottenham. But from a Tottenham perspective, there isn't a worse club to play this weekend, is there? The feel-good factor of Newcastle, it's so significant at the moment. So I feel like Newcastle, it's not ideal opposition, but what we have to remember is we're getting carried away a little bit with Newcastle. I've just been talking about them winning the league in the near future, and we're talking about them potentially bringing in Antonio Conte to replace Bruce and signing whoever. they're currently in a relegation fight, and they currently have a fairly pitiful squad. So it can work. It can work for Tottenham, and it wouldn't be too surprising to see Tottenham get something out of this. But I'm going to back the feel-good factor. I'm going to back the new dawn at St James's Park, and I'm optimistic that Newcastle will shade it 2-1.
Absolutely. And Ben, you're confident that Newcastle will get a win as well, right?
I've went for 2-1 as well. We talked about the off-the-field influence and factors at Watford. Watford are against a really good team in Liverpool on a 70-match unbeaten run, whereas Tottenham just aren't very good. I think they're 3 1-0 victories at the start of the season. Again, they flatter to deceive. Their underlying data never suggested that they were playing, in a rich vein of form. And, their world come crashing down since then, really. And they haven't, Nuno, to me as well, we talked about Brendan Rodgers. I don't get Nuno. I really don't. And this passive style, this conservative approach to the game. He should have been sacked for putting Harry Kane on the left wing for a start. That's a sackable offence, one of the world's best strikers in and around the box. And to stick him out on the left-hand side, fair enough for Heung-min Son, who transcends fixtures and will deliver performances, but still, Harry Kane on the left, you cannot legislate for that.
You want to get him taking corners, don't you?
Goal kicks.
No, exactly. No, I'm going for
Hotspur
Spurs. Exactly, yeah. So I'm going for Spurs win. I feel like on paper they should be too strong, but you guys are actually convincing me, given the fact that, the feel-good factor at St James's, that the place is going to be rocking. Not sure what the fans will be turning up wearing, but we'll see. I'm going to go for a Spurs win. And again, a reminder of our top bet from the betting expert community, over 3.5 goals. So hopefully a goal fest on Tyneside. Now, the last game we're going to talk about, just to round up the game week, is Arsenal against Crystal Palace on Monday night, where here Arsenal do go in as the favourites. But Rory, you think the Patrick Vieira effect could have an influence on this one? Talk us through it.
Yeah, this is the fixture that Patrick Vieira has been looking forward to the most since he became Crystal Palace manager, isn't it? This is a dream come true moment. It's a pivotal moment in his life. So I think that he will go into it really determined to get something out of it. And I think what we've seen from this Arsenal team under Arteta is, if somebody's determined against him, he struggles. If you turn up and you're ready to fight Arsenal and go for the jugular against them, you will generally get something. And I think Palace aren't great. They're a decent enough side, but they certainly aren't great. But do they have enough to get a point against Arsenal? I think they certainly do. And the way that we've seen them, the resilience that they've displayed. The game against West Ham United was an example of it. In the last minute against Brighton, it sort of didn't go their way. But generally speaking, I think that they have shown enough level of improvement, and I don't think it's particularly surprising to anticipate them getting at least a point against Arsenal.
Now here, the community from Betting Expert are also going for a pretty close affair, so looking at both teams to score market and selecting no. So basically that's backing either team to keep a clean sheet. But for you, Ben, what have you made of Crystal Palace's transfer dealings in the summer and their start to the season, and how do you think they'll shape up against Arsenal?
Yeah, I was worried for Palace pre-season, if the truth be known. I didn't think Patrick Vieira was a great appointment. And then we've seen a changing of the guard. We've seen a host of players depart, some seasoned, hardy professionals, Scott Dans, Patrick Van Aanholt, they're all departing. And we've seen these players coming into the squad relatively unknown or unproven at the highest level. We've seen a change in philosophy and move away from that more passive approach under Roy Hodgson to Vieira saying, right, we want to play on the a front press, push higher up the pitch. And it sounds obvious, but it never really quite happened. And we want to make Wilfried Zaha the focal point of all of our attacks. We'll get him and we'll isolate the fullback with Zaha. And results early season sort of suggested that for Palace it was going to be a long, hard slug in the season. But they've turned it around. I think the result against Tottenham was a massive, massive result. I think the addition of Conor Gallagher, I think he's put himself in the shop window, and he wants to prove to Thomas Tuchel that he's deserving of a place in that Chelsea squad. And he's been excellent. I think we've seen glimpses from Edouard and what he can do, although we need him to kick on from those couple of goals. The return of Michael Olise, from injury. And again, his goals from the bench, and they're tipping him to be this season's Eze. And if he can sort of match and deliver the types of performance that Eze has done prior to his injury, then again, the young lad's got a big future.
Yeah, I thought Eze was going to be a big loss for Palace, but it seems like they've replaced him quite well. But Rory, what do you look at in terms of the matchups here? What do you think Palace can maybe exploit against Arsenal?
I think what you have to do against Arsenal is take the game to them, don't you? I mean, if you let them start stroking the ball about as Tottenham did, then we know that they have it in them. But if you match them for fight, I think you can bully Arsenal. I think Palace should be looking to take the game to them, really, really let them know that they're in a physical war of attrition. There's no reason why Palace can't get something. I think that should be the approach from Vieira. It's not a million miles away from the way that he used to play the game himself, is it? Make sure that the opposition know they're in a battle, and make sure they know you're there. And if they do that, if you take the game to this Arsenal team, I'm not sure that they have the minerals for the fight.
Well, let's have your quick prediction then for this one.
Go for a 1-1.
1-1. So both teams to score in this one. Complete opposite of what the betting expert community is saying. But good luck to you, Rory. Now, I'm going for a home win here. I feel like Arsenal should be, again, too strong on paper. I'm going to favour what the bookies are going with in terms of their favourites. But Ben, give us your prediction for Arsenal Palace.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I think it's going to be a little tighter. I expect Arsenal to edge it. A pretty dour game, 1-0.
Nice one. Now that wraps up all the predictions for game week 8. Let's just pull them up for you now just to summarise all of the picks from all of our experts. So guys, first of all, I want to say thanks a lot for joining us on the big stage. We'll see you again next week to review how you all did. So for now, Rory, Ben, thanks a lot for joining us.
Cheers, lads.
Yes.
And of course, if you want to post your own predictions onto the Betting Expert website and stand a chance at winning cash prizes every week and every month, not just on the Premier League, but all the football you can think of, head on over to bettingexpert.com. But for now, thanks a lot for watching and hope you enjoyed this edition of The Big Stage.